look, I'm a wop, but I'm the top wop. He also had that nickname Old Blue Eyes, which kind of further emphasized his appeal to white Americans. They knew what kind of image they needed to project. One of Sinatra's albums, Nothing But the Best, has actually a really heavily edited photograph on him where there's claims that his skin was lightened in this photograph. So this ability to kind of navigate these cultural things, I think, really helped Sinatra rise up and take a lot of Italian Americans with him. This process of whitening, whether you believe they're white or not, they definitely went through a process of whitening, involved a degree of cultural erasure and assimilation. Hi, I'm Danielle Romero. Thank you so much for being with me here on my channel, where we talk about American identity and family stories. I know my parents watch my channel, which is kind of awesome. It's a little stressful, kind of awesome. Hi, Mom and Dad. And I always feel excited when I get to do a video about Italian American experience, because my dad really instilled a huge pride in me of being Italian American. And I grew up seeing myself as Italian American. I didn't know about my mom's heritage. So that has been a newer element kind of thrown into the mix here. The Americanization of Italians absolutely fascinates me. And it's a little bittersweet because my grandpa Dom, my dad's dad, he was the son of immigrants from southern Italy. And he was so proud of being Italian. He was also just a walking stereotype. I mean, truly, all of the Mamma Mia, like all English, like that was real. It's funny to me now that it's kind of like a stereotype. I'm just like, that's just my grandpa. But I have done a lot of work on the Italian American experience. I've explored the lynchings of Italian immigrants and Sicilian immigrants and Italian Americans here. There are so many instances of that and their relationship to African Americans and the liminal space they kind of occupied, especially in the South. For many people, it's hard for them to imagine a time when Italian Americans were not considered part of the white race. But there was a time where this was not a guarantee, and this transformation occurred mostly between 1950 and 1975. And this is a fascinating, horrifying, eye-opening journey of cultural evolution and assimilation. But what does it mean to be whitened? And how did this process unfold? So to understand this, we have to delve into some of the societal changes that happened post-World War II and the rising popularity of Italian American figures in American pop culture, because what really, really creates this momentum, the current that moves things in the culture. It's pop culture, it's musicians, it's actors, it's actresses. These are the people that kind of set the stage and tone. And so in the decades following the end of World War II, the images of Italians in America shifted dramatically. Initially, they were subjected to intense discriminations, even put into internment camps, which I did a video on that. But they are gradually becoming more assimilated, more accepted. I mean, how does this happen? So the mass migration of Italians to the United States was one of the absolute largest in history, particularly those from the South, like my family, who were seeking a better life after the new Italian government was reorganizing, reunifying. Southern Italians were dealing with very high taxes, higher food prices. They had restricted voting privileges. There was already this deep divide between North and South, and this reorganizing of Italy kind of just solidified that. And so there was this mass exodus to the United States. People are looking for better living conditions, work opportunities, the American dream. But what they encountered was pretty different, I think, than what they were expecting. So upon arriving, Southern Italians had significant challenges. A lot of them had dark hair, darker skin, dark eyes, and they often found themselves doing physically demanding jobs for very little pay, similar to African Americans, except one of the issues, especially in the North, was that sometimes African Americans were even making more, even though they were heavily discriminated against, because they could speak English so well. And a lot of the Italian immigrants did not have a grasp on English at all. There was a phrase that I came across, and it said that Italian Americans were led to being seen as, quote, black by local custom, which I thought was so interesting. Now, many Southern Italians, they didn't have these preconceived notions, though, about African Americans, and they often just ignored or defied these implicit social and racial codes of the United States, at least in the beginning, because it was just not part of their schema. And so this lack of a bias kind of was a double-edged sword, because it led to solidarity with other oppressed groups, at least for a while. But then there was additional scrutiny from like the powerful Anglo society at the time. And so many Italians felt the need to abandon their heritage to make it out in the new country. Entering Italian-American celebrities now, like Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin, they become icons in the post-war era. But their success wasn't just a matter of talent, although obviously incredibly talented men. But they knew what kind of image they needed to project. Sinatra had lighter skin, blue eyes, and he was embodying a version of Italian-Americanness that was palatable to Anglo-America. And Dean Martin had a huge transformation. First of all, his name was not Dean Martin, Dino Cricchetti. And this transformation was crucial in altering the perception of Italian Americans in broader American society. And I think it's fascinating to this idea of celebrities and they're pioneering whatever they're pioneering and how much that trickles down towards the rest of society. They were symbols. Their careers coincided, kind of a quintessential Italian American moment. Now, Sinatra had this ability to appeal to both Italian Americans and the broader American public, and that was really unique. He actually referred to himself as the top WAP, and WAP is a derogatory term for Italian Americans. Sometimes people say it means without papers, like WOP, but I think it has to do with guapo, meaning handsome, and it just it got kind of mutilated and then in English. But top WAP, it's a play on a racial slur. And it was to kind of highlight, though, this dual identity and not taking it too seriously. And look, I'm a WAP, but I'm the top WAP. And, he also had that nickname, Old Blue Eyes, which kind of further emphasized his appeal to white Americans. So this ability to kind of navigate these cultural things, I think, really helped Sinatra rise up and take a lot of Italian Americans with him. Here's the thing, though, that I found about Sinatra, which is super weird. And I don't know if I could totally verify this, but that he actually had more tan skin and very dark hair. Pictures of young Sinatra show him with his thick, dark hair. You can't really see the blue eyes. And at first, as his career grew, he began to be photographed and displayed a little bit in a different way. And very rarely as an adult did you see Frank Sinatra with his natural hair out. Usually he had a hat pulled down so you couldn't see his dark hair, or keeping his hair really short. And so I've kind of thought about the way that he was being presented, right? He's being sold. He's being sold to the American public, and they bought it up. One of Sinatra's albums, Nothing But the Best, has actually a really heavily edited photograph on him where there's claims that his skin was lightened in this photograph, his blue eyes were emphasized and brightened to look more blue, his teeth were whitened, and his dark hair is invisible under the hat, and he looks all American. His blue eyes were kind of the focal point of his entire career, right? His old blue eyes. And I don't know, what was this? Was this focusing on a distinctly more white feature of having blue eyes, making him more attractive? I don't know. It's super interesting. Dean Martin also successfully whitened his identity while maintaining Italian heritage, right? But he renamed himself from the very ethnic Dino Cricchetti to the whiter, more American sounding Dean Martin. He even went so far as to make his appearance less ethnic looking by getting plastic surgery to reduce the size of his nose. So when we have people complaining about how, there's this rise in plastic surgery and we can't believe how people are behaving, it's this has been going on for a while. And, Dean Martin's album covers and films, it's very similar to Frank Sinatra, where he's being shown non-ethnic, right? But later in Dean Martin's career, he actually released albums using his real name. Sinatra's mastery of the English language also was proven. He became the musician that defined the standards genre music that white Americans loved for generations. And these English standards prove that Sinatra was in touch with what America wanted. American standards were totally different than traditional Italian songs of maybe Sinatra's childhood. And so this was a strategic choice that helped him to be accepted. The success of Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin, yes, they were incredibly talented, but they also had this ability to navigate and transform the perception of their ethnic identity here in the United States. I think it's not much of an exaggeration, though, to say the Rat Pack with Frank Sinatra, they desegregated Las Vegas basically overnight, the Las Vegas music scene. Basically, they would tell venues that they wouldn't perform, so the venue would lose the entire Rat Pack if Sammy Davis Jr. wasn't allowed to have equal accommodations, and that threatened their pocketbooks. And, these venues, for the most part, they're in it for money above all else. And Frank Sinatra was a fervent anti-racist, and he was an early activist. He refused to stay at hotels, and he refused to play at clubs that didn't admit Black people. And so due to his relentless and tireless efforts, Las Vegas actually became pretty quickly integrated. And so I think if Italian Americans want a holiday, I'd rather celebrate Frank Sinatra Day instead of Columbus Day. So I think we have this complex legacy for Frank Sinatra where, yes, he wanted to assimilate. He wanted to become part of American culture, but he wasn't leaving people behind. They became symbols of the American dream, embodying the idea that anyone, regardless of their background, could achieve success. Their careers helped shift the perception of Italian Americans, kind of bringing them into pop culture. This process of whitening, whether you believe they're white or not, they definitely went through a process of whitening, involved a degree of cultural erasure and assimilation. Many Italian Americans had to navigate this delicate balance between maintaining their heritage and adopting American norms, and this often meant downplaying their ethnic identity to fit into predominantly Anglo-American society. And this struggle to balance these competing demands often lead to a sense of cultural dislocation and loss of identity. And that continues on even into their grandchildren's generation, right? For people my age who are in their 30s and 40s. And the pressure to assimilate was immense. And for many, it came at a personal cost. I was reading someone sharing an anecdote from someone named Antonella Lamada reflecting on her parents' struggle, stating, quote, "My parents did not consider it important to have their kids connected with the old country. What they considered more important was to make it in the new country." And this sentiment was common among Italian immigrants who prioritized economic stability because they're coming from a country that's just not stable at all, societal acceptance over cultural preservation. I really loved looking into just this angle from pop culture and how powerful, that is, how powerful music culture is and film culture is, and why it's important for us to talk about this so that we're not just like mindlessly taking in media without thinking about it and thinking about its effects and how it influences us and maybe even how we can use that for good. So if you're interested in any other videos that I did on the Italian American experience or seeing a sit-down interview I did with my dad in person where he shared his experience growing up Italian American in New York, I'll leave a link to that below. Otherwise, we'll talk soon.